All right, so back on January 28th, the FBI executed a search warrant at the Fulton County election records storage facility. And they went in there, and we have the search warrant. I'll go through it here in a minute. And they seized all sorts of records, whether it's paper documents, there's electronic records, ticker tape records, envelopes, whatever was there that had to do with the 2020 election. And someone interesting happened to pop up during this search warrant operation, and it's the director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard. And it's extraordinary that the director of national intelligence, the DNI, would be on location for any FBI operation of any kind or any law enforcement operation. But to see the DNI show up at an operation where the FBI is executing a search warrant for 2020 election records is really it's an extraordinary thing. And what could it possibly mean? I think I may know. I don't think anyone really knows for sure, but I have some guesses. But before we get to an explanation of why, or a possible explanation for why DNI Gabbard was there, I want to take a step back and try and trace how we got to a point where the FBI was executing a search warrant at an election records facility. And I think the best place to start, you could go all the way back to 2020. We're not going to do that. I think it started this past summer with the state election board for Georgia. In a 3-2 vote, they passed a resolution seeking documents from the 2020 election in Fulton County, including voter lists, chain of custody forms, ballot images, documentation of security seals, and ballot scanner paperwork. One of the members, Fervier, and the Democrat Party appointee, Sarah Tyndall Gazal, opposed the resolution. Fervier said the investigation had already been completed, and we already reprimanded the county back in May of 2024 for double scanning more than 3,000 ballots during a recount of the 2020 election. But on the other side, one of the other members, Johnston, said the case isn't over and Fulton hasn't responded to the board's Election Day 2024 subpoena seeking 2020 documents. A judge had scheduled a hearing in September on the county's motion to quash the subpoena. So back on November 5th of 2024, this board sent a subpoena to Fulton County wanting access to their records. And this is after they'd already been reprimanded. So they reprimanded them in May of 2024. And then 6 months later in November, they sent a subpoena saying, hey, turn over the 2020 election records to us. We want to take a look at this and make sure that we didn't miss anything you guys hid or didn't keep or whatever. We're looking for more violations. And that case is ongoing. But while that is ongoing, they decided this summer to pass a resolution asking the Secretary of State and the Attorney General to step in, including the DOJ, to obtain a document. So this is the state Secretary of State for Georgia and the Attorney General for Georgia. This resolution was asking them to contact DOJ and help the state election board get access to the documents. They want the DOJ to intervene. This complaint was filed by DOJ months later on December 11th, 2025. And this is the DOJ suing the Fulton County Clerk of Courts. Che Alexander is the person named on here. So this is US v. Alexander is what it's called on the docket. But it's Alexander is the clerk of the courts for Fulton County, and it's just suing that person in their official capacity as the clerk of the court. So just if you see US v. Alexander, it's just because that person is the clerk of the court. And they're suing them under the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act. So this lawsuit states that Title III of the Civil Rights Act gives the AG sweeping powers to come in and obtain election records. And that Title III also tells the states and the counties and all of the federal election facilities that they're required to retain and preserve all of their records and paperwork having to do with the elections that are conducted under their authority. And it says that when a written demand is produced asking for those records, they're supposed to be turned over. And if the custodian to whom the written demand is made refuses to comply, then the Civil Rights Act, the CRA, requires a special statutory proceeding in which the courts play a limited but vital role in assisting the Attorney General in their investigative powers. So the Attorney General or her representative may request a federal court to issue an order directing the custodian to produce the demanded records. And that is what is happening here in this case. And they say, look, you're required to keep these records. The Attorney General has the authority to step in and give a demand for the records and to acquire them. And you have to produce them. And if you say, no, you won't, if you refuse, then that's when the courts get involved. And that's what this lawsuit is about. And it states that this proceeding arises from the Attorney General's investigation into Fulton County's compliance with federal election law, particularly the National Voting Rights Act and HAVA. Both the NVRA and HAVA require election officials to maintain and preserve certain records and papers that fall within the scope of Section 301 of Title III of the Civil Rights Act. And here's the factual allegations. July 30th, 2025, the State Board of Georgia passed a resolution calling upon the assistance of the Attorney General to effect compliance with voting transparency. And that was what we were just talking about right here. On October 30th, 2025, the Attorney General sent a demand letter to the Fulton County Board of Registration and Elections, demanding all records in your possession responsive to the recent subpoena issued to your office by the State Election Board. That's the subpoena we were talking about earlier. And then they sent another one. Sorry, it's not the same one. They sent another one on October 6th. So that's two subpoenas. Requested all used and void ballots, stubs of all ballots, signature envelopes, and corresponding envelope digital files from the 2020 election in Fulton County. The October 30th letter requested these records pursuant to the Attorney General's authority under 52 U.S.C. 2701, and that's going to come up again, that statute. The October 30th letter identified the purpose of this request as ascertaining Georgia's compliance with various federal election laws, and the Attorney General also seeks to assist the State Election Board in their transparency efforts under Georgia law. The October 30th letter specifically cited transparency concerns as a basis for the request. The October 30th letter cited a November 7th, 2024 letter, so that's the previous subpoena, right? And this is the letter that went with it, from the State Board to the Fulton County Board, asserting, quote, unexplained anomalies in vote tabulation and storage related to the 2020 election. On November 14th, 2025, the Fulton Board sent a response letter, and in that letter, the Fulton Board replied that, quote, the physical ballots, stubs, and absentee ballot envelopes for the 2020 election remain in the Fulton County Superior Court clerk's possession and are under seal. The November 14th letter further cited and attached a letter from the Fulton clerk to the State Board dated October 21st, 2025. In that letter, the clerk stated that the records sought are under seal and may not be produced absent a court order. On November 21st, the Attorney General sent a letter to the Fulton County clerk requesting the documents on the same grounds, and the letter restated the Attorney General's request under the same authorities and purposes. The October 30th letter and the November 14th letter were attached for reference here to this. As with the filing of this complaint, the Fulton clerk has failed to respond to the Attorney General. So that is why they filed this suit. And they do it, let's see, they list 52 U.S.C. 2703, and then it was 2701, I believe, earlier. And it's filed by Harmeet K. Dillon, who I think is doing a fantastic job leading the Civil Rights Division. And then Eric V. Neff is the acting chief for the voting section of the Civil Rights Division. And then Brittany Bennett is the trial attorney who's local and is doing this, making the filing. So they file suit seeking these records. Fulton County says we need a court order. And this is not the only place where DOJ has made such a lawsuit. In fact, DOJ has sued 18 states for 2020 election records plus one county. And that one county is Fulton County, Georgia. So I don't know if I want to go here yet. I might save this one. I might save this one for a little bit. What I want to talk about next, I'm going to save this. All right. So Justice Department sued all of these states, and those states include Colorado, Hawaii, Massachusetts, Nevada, as well as several others. But it was back in December that they added Fulton County. Let's talk about the search warrant. So this search warrant, which the case is sealed. I've tried looking up. The case is sealed. The search warrant is for the office of the clerk. It was signed by a magistrate judge, Catherine M. Salinas, and the attorney for the government who got this search warrant is Thomas Albus. And we're going to talk about him in a minute, okay? Scroll down here to the attachment. And it says, these are the things to be seized. All records relating to violations of Title 52, United States Code 20701 and 20511, those violations occurring after October 12th, 2020, including all the physical ballots from the 2020 election in Fulton County. And that's absentee ballots, envelopes, absentee voting ballots, provisional ballots, in-person election day ballots, emergency ballots, damaged or destroyed ballots, duplicated ballots, or any ballot at all. All tabulator tapes, opening tapes, zero tapes, closing tapes, all of it. All ballot images produced during original ballot counting on November 3rd, 2020, and the ones produced during the recount, and any other ballot images that were created from ballot scanning from the 2020 election in Fulton County. All voter rolls from the 2020 general election in Fulton County, including absentee, early voting, in person, all of them. And this warrant also authorizes a review of electronic storage media and electronically stored information seized or copied pursuant to this warrant in order to locate evidence, fruits, and instrumentalities described in this warrant. And it further also authorizes that the electronic review may be done by anybody who the government designates, including their own law enforcement officers, attorneys, staff, and technical experts. Thomas Albus. Meet the special prosecutor. AG Bondi has empowered to investigate election integrity cases nationwide. That's right. Haven't seen this talked about much. Actually, I haven't seen it anywhere. Pam Bondi named a special prosecutor and specifically gave him the authority to investigate election integrity in every state and province and district. So he's one step below a special counsel with his own office. He's not a special counsel. He's what's called a special prosecutor. Right now, he is, and actually this was very recently, he was confirmed as the United States Attorney for the state of Missouri. But after that happened, Pam Bondi stepped in and said, actually, I want you to do a little bit more than that, Mr. Albus. And she used 28 U.S.C. 515, which is the same statute that's used for all special prosecutors and special counsels. And it's a statute that allows the Attorney General to say, you are an attorney who is empowered to conduct investigations, get subpoenas, search warrants, can prosecute civil and criminal cases in all of the districts or just the ones they name. But she did it for all 94 U.S. attorney districts. And it was, the document specifically says you have the authority to conduct voter fraud probes anywhere in the U.S. This story broke just recently, last week, in Bloomberg. Nobody knows how many investigations Albus has going right now, but we know at least one of them is Fulton County. And he went and he got that search warrant. That's the first thing we've seen since he got this authority around sometime last year. I don't think it actually gives us a date for when she did this. Yeah, I don't think she did. Yeah, I don't think it gives us that information. So Albus appears on this court-approved warrant in Georgia. And that means that this guy was able to go to a judge and give her enough information that she decided that there was probable cause to authorize a search warrant for those records. What did he show her? What could he possibly have shown her that would have convinced that judge, yep, I'm going to sign off on a search warrant that allows the FBI to seize all of Fulton County's election records. Well, one thing might be 52 USC 2701, because both this complaint from the Civil Rights Division of DOJ and the search warrant cite that statute. Okay. And that statute says, I think I put it in my thread, but I'm just going to go ahead and look it up over here. (20701). 20701 covers retention and preservation of records and papers by officers of elections. And so if there's a thought that, hey, there might be something missing, there might be, we're worried that you guys did not retain all that you're supposed to retain, or you didn't preserve, or there's some question about the preservation of those records, this is what they would use. That's what this civil rights complaint was about, and that's what this search warrant says is what they're looking for, is violations of that statute, violations of the retention and preservation of records. What's the other one? 20511. Let's look that up. 20511 says criminal penalties for a person, including an election official, who in any election or federal office knowingly and willfully intimidates or threatens or coerces, knowingly, willingly deprives, defrauds, or attempts to deprive or defraud a resident of the election process. Violations of records, retention and preservation, violations of people's ability to vote, free of intimidation, coercion, et cetera, et cetera. It sounds like that's what he's looking into. Okay, so if we track this from step to step to step, you have the state board. You have the state board wanting records from Fulton County, and Fulton County saying, no, they're under seal, you can't have them. The state election board of Georgia gets DOJ involved, and DOJ says, hey, we want to take a look at your Fulton County election records. And Fulton County says, no, sorry, you can't have them. They ended up taking it. They send letters and subpoenas back and forth, and Fulton County then tells them, no, you have to get a court order if you want access to these things. So DOJ says, okay, we're going to sue 18 states and Fulton County for their records related to the 2020 election. And then sometime either around here, shortly before or shortly after, I don't know which, Bondi designates a special prosecutor to handle election fraud and election integrity cases nationwide. And that guy goes and gets a search warrant for Fulton County, Georgia election records, convinces the magistrate judge, we need access to these things. And the judge says, yeah, I agree. You actually do. You showed me. That's what has to happen. Like, to be perfectly clear, the judge had to have seen probable cause evidence of violations of records, retention and preservation, and violations of people's ability to vote free of coercion, free of intimidation, defrauding them of the right to vote or the voting process. She had to have seen violations of those things that occurred in 2020. And then she says, okay, yeah, you can go and search all that stuff and get all of those things. And then on site, as the search warrant is executed, are two really, really interesting people. One of them is the deputy director of the FBI, Andrew Bailey. The other is DNI Gabbard. Now, when a search warrant is executed, or when any FBI operation is done, and you have one of the top dogs at the FBI on site for it, that signifies how important it is. And the fact they didn't do a press release or a press conference or anything like that. So it's not like he showed up in order to be on camera and, do a photo op. That just shows how much more significant it is. He wasn't there to do a photo op or for narrative effect. and neither was Gabbard. Now there's another piece. Let's talk about why the DNI is there. According to the Wall Street Journal, Tulsi Gabbard is hunting for 2020 election fraud. She has been leading in an administration-wide effort to hunt for proof of tampering in the 2020 election. Here's one of the photos we have of her at the raid. We only have a couple photos of Tulsi Gabbard there, and I think that speaks to how serious this was. It wasn't a photo op. She didn't do a press conference. She didn't do a press release. She didn't tweet about it or X-post about it. According to this article in the Wall Street Journal, Gabbard has begun studying information about voting machines, analyzed data from swing states, and pursued theories that the election was the word I can't stay on YouTube, particularly on foreign government interference. Gabbard has, quote, regularly briefed Trump and Susie Wiles about her inquiry in recent months, along with others involved in the investigation. Others included senior DOJ officials, Ann Cleta Mitchell and Kurt Olson, who have a history of being involved in election-related lawsuits. Gabbard, I should say, that's a typo. Gabbard has also consulted with IC officials, quote, about claims of foreign interference in the 2020 election. She's expected to prepare a report on her work. Gabbard's office said the Director of National Intelligence has a vital role in identifying vulnerabilities in our critical infrastructure and protecting against exploitation. This is true. DNI Gabbard has and will continue to take elections within her authorities alongside our interagency partners to support ensuring the integrity of our elections. Gabbard has also been involved in separate efforts to promote allegations that Obama and senior officials in his administration manufactured a false conspiracy that Russia interfered in the 2016 election to undermine Trump's first White House victory. So something to keep in mind about that, and that is not how I would describe what she did, but that's how the Wall Street Journal did. Something to keep in mind. Gabbard's work on the weaponization of intelligence in the 2016 election, which is what happened, resulted in, this past summer, it resulted in hundreds of pages of disclosure. She produced a report. She did a press conference that was extremely professional. And she produced evidence to DOJ, along with criminal referrals. And now she's working on a report about the 2020 election. So, why was Gabbard on site? Well, like I said earlier, I don't think it has anything to do with a photo op. I don't think, because there wasn't one. I think she's there because I think she's there for confirmation. I think there's things they expected to find and either did find or didn't, but she wanted to be there at that moment. I think the same thing about Bailey. I think these people were there because the deputy director wanted his presence there at a significant event, right? And then I think DNI Gabbard was there because of intelligence. That's the only reason she goes anywhere as DNI. Is she's following where the intelligence takes her. And I think there's an intelligence component to this that isn't necessarily record-keeping violations or intimidation, coercion, those types of Civil Rights Act violations. I'm not saying they're not at all that, but I don't think violations of those two statutes are what cause the Director of National Intelligence to show up and walk into a warehouse or go into an FBI semi-truck, which I believe is what this this might be. It says Tulsi Gabbard speaks on the phone while standing inside a vehicle loaded with boxes outside the Fulton County election hub. So she's inside a truck where they have the records, or where they move some of the records. So I think it's intelligence that took her there. And either they found something they expected to find, or they didn't find it. But she wanted to be there, eyes on, for the moment. And I think she wanted to be there with the team that was executing the search warrant. And she wanted to discuss the aspect of this that took her there, specifically the possibility of foreign interference. And that just makes this whole thing take on a level of seriousness that is quite extraordinary. Quite extraordinary. Check this out. Check this out. This is from 9 months ago, and it's at a cabinet meeting. This is when Trump said he wanted DOJ to investigate Chris Krebs. It's from April 11th, 2025. There's the date. I don't know why I didn't see it at first. All right, listen to what Gabbard says here.
Have evidence of how these electronic voting systems have been vulnerable to hackers for a very long time, and vulnerable to exploitation to manipulate the results of the votes being cast, which further drives forward your mandate to bring about paper ballots across the country so that voters can have faith in the integrity of our elections. Thanks to your leadership.
Very interesting. Maybe that's why she's there.